What is up, guys? My machine, McNasty, the 2020 RZR Pro XP, that one, we're about to hit 1,000 miles, so we're gonna do a bit of a 1,000-mile review on the machine. I'll go over some of the shit I've changed and some of the problems I had. So let's start off with why the Pro XP. When dude had his first four-seater, I fell in love with side-by-sides. I needed one. I was actually trying to order a base model X3 before I got this, and the dealership that I was going to order from had one of these on their website, and it said it was in stock. So I watched a bunch of videos on it, and I started to like the thing. So I went in, I wanted to look at that before I pulled the trigger on ordering the X3. They had a X3, I don't know, the rock crawling edition one, not the one I was going to get. They had one there. So I was able to sit in this machine and in the X3, and I was sold on this one. I like how the interior felt better. I was more comfortable in the machine. I know a lot of people like the X3s because you sit so low in there. It was too low for me. This was just perfect. My opinion, the regular RZRs, it's too high for me. So before we get into some of the problems and I start ripping this thing apart, let me start off by saying, I love this machine. And despite the things that I'm gonna say that have went wrong, and maybe some of the little annoying things, I really love this machine.
Oh my God, you're so funny. Here, have a bite of sandwich.
Stop it. Get some help.
2 weeks into owning this machine, I rolled it. So I quickly found out some of the plastics on this thing are kind of chintzy and break pretty easy. The little tabs broke off. The plastic on the doors were garbage. The frame survived. And to replace these plastics, they're expensive. I ran with those doors kind of hanging off for a little while and eventually got the Polaris aluminum door skins, the full doors, which I've been running for a while now. And those have done great. I love them. They keep shit out. They got a nice weather seal. They were something I wanted to do down the line anyways. So I did myself a favor. I rolled it and trashed my factory doors. So I was able to get them faster. So the first real issue I had, when I would crank the wheel and go slow, I would hear popping. And it looks like something from the factory. I don't know if they didn't do it or didn't do it correctly or didn't put enough. There wasn't Loctite on the outer race of the bearing in the front hubs. I fixed that. I pressed the front bearings out. I put a bunch of green Loctite on the outer race, pressed them back in, and it worked for months. I don't know, maybe 4 months, something like that. One of them started popping again, so I decided to replace them. So overall, since I've had the machine, 2 years, 1,000 miles, I've done 1 passenger side bearing and 2 driver side bearings. And they've done the popping twice. The second time I changed the driver side bearing is I had it apart and I could see that the bearing itself was not in great condition. So I just swapped it out. Maybe someday I'll try expensive bearings and who knows, they might be better. They might be the same. I don't know. I think it's just the 2020s that had this wheel bearing popping issue. I'm pretty sure 21, 22, they went to a cast steel hub as opposed to the cast aluminum, and apparently that fixes the problem. And you know, dude has a 21 and he never had popping wheel bearings, so it looks like it is fixed. So I guess the biggest event on this machine that happened would be the stop ride. Polaris issued a stop ride for all these 2020s for the clutch exploding. I think it's another problem that's fixed from 21 and up, but the 2020s, they had exploding clutches, which was really unfortunate. I've seen videos of it happening online. Nothing happened with mine. We did get that stop ride. We had a big trip coming up, and Polaris, when this first happened, they had no resolution to this at all. It was just stop riding your machine, and if you ride it and it explodes, that's your problem. Replacing the clutch wasn't the thing I was scared about with just ignoring the stop ride. It's if it explodes, some people it was damaging the crankshaft. That is what I didn't want. So instead of waiting or risking that, I got a STM Rage 3 primary clutch, all billet aluminum. So I just pulled my factory primary off and put that STM on and kept riding. It was obviously disappointing because that clutch is friggin' expensive, like $1,300. Just thought of something that I forgot. This one is probably it's the first model year and we don't have everything completely figured out yet. My secondary clutch was not properly aligned. You get little shims. Do I have one?
346 minutes later.
I ended up having to buy some shims. It's an easy thing to do. You're just taking the bolt out and you shim it out, right? But for the amount of money these cost, you would kind of assume that the clutches are aligned from the factory. Mine wasn't. I think Dude's is fine. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, if you have trouble getting it in gear, that could be it. Easiest way to know is if you take your clutch cover off, fire it up. If your secondary is sitting there spinning in park, then you probably need to realign your secondary. I don't know, maybe 500-600 miles, we found this. That was the driver's side lower ball joint. I could actually feel a little slop in the steering wheel. There was something, and we were trying to figure it out. And ultimately, that's what that was. Replaced that. Went on a trip to Tennessee. By the end of that trip to Tennessee, we realized the lower A-arm on the driver's side was tweaked a little bit. The lower A-arms on this machine from the factory, they're super disappointing. They are pencil thin. I mean, they're just asking to be bent. I understand that the factory puts weak points in the machine so you don't tweak the frame, but this thing just trash, unacceptable. So knowing that eventually I was going to get bigger tires, I wanted to get some forward A-arms, also high clearance. I went the budget route. I went Super ATV. So far, they've done great. There were some issues with those, putting them on, and it's all stupid stuff, like powder coat being in a bushing fit, so you got to sit there and clean that out. But that's what you get when you go the budget route. While doing those A-arms, I noticed the passenger side lower ball joint was now sloppy. And thankfully, when I ordered those A-arms, I just had all new ball joints come pre-installed in the A-arms. So overall, that was probably 700 miles. Both lower ball joints would have had to been replaced because they was sloppy. This machine basically came from the factory with collapsed tender springs. If you have the Pro XP, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. Mine and Dude's, both machines, right away. They last, what, like less than a month, and the springs are already collapsed, and you're supposed to be at, 15 inches of ride height, and the ass end's sitting at 11 inches. Again, on this project, I went the budget route. I did RZR tender springs. They work. I do have to readjust my rear. It is sagging a little bit, but I probably installed those a year ago. So far they're doing good. I don't think it's the end-all be-all fix for this. It's kind of a band-aid. Best way to do it is dual rate springs, which I will do eventually. But when I was doing it, I didn't have money to do the dual rate setup. Tender springs from RZR were a lot cheaper. They did the job. It's nice that Polaris gives you a full skid plate on a factory machine. Very nice of them. Problem is, that skid plate is almost useless. It's paper thin, keeps crap out, but I easily bent my carrier bearing cross member. I landed on a little rock and I tweaked the cross member. So if you're going to be running shit over, I highly recommend upgrading the skid plate. Both Pro XPs on this channel are running the trail armor, 1/2" UHMW. Something like that. It all depends on what type of riding you're going to do. If you plan on using the skid plate, get a better skid plate. So I also had some issues with the batteries. If you've seen all the videos, you've probably heard me say, oh, this about the battery, or my battery sucks, and all this stuff. And I had the one battery, I'm trying to run all the lights, and you hit that switch for 4-wheel drive, try to do something, and it doesn't engage. If you think you have battery issues, just do the dual battery setup or upgraded battery. Because if you wait too long like I did, you kill the one battery you have and have to replace both. So one thing that is not damage related about this machine I do not like is the low gear. The low gear is way too high. Doing gear reduction is still on the table for me, but before I did that, I wanted to see what the low gear is like with the tuner. In low gear from the factory, these machines are kind of tuned back, so when you're in low, it feels like it has no balls at all, and that was super annoying. So I wanted to try the tuner, because I was gonna tune it anyways. With the tuner, they give you more of your low gear, meaning you get more power in low gear. It's not scaled back. I want to run it this summer like that, and if I still don't like it, then I will probably be doing gear reduction next winter. If you've seen these videos before, you know my feelings on the intake tubes. The factory intake tubes on these machines are pretty rough. I've covered it before, but the pre-filter intake tube on the 2020 Pro XP has to be replaced. It's just garbage. They fixed it for 21 and up, but this one will collapse. The other two, the J tube, the charge tube, they're just chintzy, hard plastic. They bottleneck, and you run the risk of cracking one. With the aftermarket ones, you get better flow. So this machine, all three have been replaced with RPM silicone intake tubes. So I don't have to worry about that crap. It's been in one video, but I had a leaking rear axle seal. Well, it's leaking again. I don't know why this is happening. There is a solid chance that I screwed up the installation on the new one, so it could just be my fault. So once those tender springs were done, then I got a shock clunk. Lucky me. It happens. A lot of people deal with it. You fix that by doing limit straps. So that's what I did. I went the budget route on that, got some PRP limit straps. Not only is it annoying, it's bad for your shocks. This machine got its name because of the amount of mud and dirt that it throws right up in the cab at you. So we did do the fender flares, which are ugly, but they work. I don't know if they work. If they work, that means Nothing's coming at you. Maybe they help. Yeah, they help. Another thing was the block off plate. Without those, mud shoots in and goes right in that gap and ends up on the side of your body and seat. Didn't really want to pay for those, so that's a set I made. So this is a sport model, meaning base model. The sport models for 2020, they did come with more than they do now, but it did not come with harnesses. This came with a regular car seatbelt, and yes, I rolled it with those seatbelts. That's what pushed getting harnesses up on the list. So if you get one of these machines, or well, if you get any machine, one of the first things you should do is harnesses. For sure. Just get harnesses. Another little safety thing that I did that I would recommend is all these cages and machines come set up to run the factory harnesses, but they also come set up to run the regular car seatbelt, which this machine had. And that includes a little like bung. It's the top mounting point for the vehicle seatbelt. And that was somewhere, yeah, right around here. I cut it off, ground it down flush, and threw paint on it because if it's right here, you can see your head can hit that. And that could be a bad day for you. Just thought of another one I forgot. Cab heat, pretty brutal in here in the summer. It gets hotter than the Alabama asphalt. I know that I made my situation worse by putting the full doors and the block off plates because it restricts airflow, but I want to keep mud out, so I deal with the extra heat. But I can tell you, I bought this machine in the summer and I didn't have any of those on, and it still gets hotter than hell in there. There's not much you can do about it unless you insulate the tunnel. You have all your coolant lines running right down the middle, and that heat just swirls down by your feet, and it gets hot. I understood buying the first year of a new model that I'd run into some little issues, and I did, but I mean, it was nothing crazy. The clutch thing is pretty crazy, but I was pretty pissed at the time, but it's been a while now. I got over it. So far, the machine's been great. A lot of the stuff that I've put on is stuff I choose to put on. Wasn't a necessity. Obviously, you get these machines and you beat the shit out of them. Stuff breaks. You gotta expect it. There's wear items. You're going through mud, through dirt. So I don't think you're gonna find a machine where you do nothing to it. You know, stuff like the clutch, that pre-intake tube. There's some stuff that you, from Polaris, you're like, come on, bro, and you have to replace it. But other than that, a lot of the stuff is my choice. Like the charge tube, you know, the other intake tubes, they didn't fail. You just look at something and I saw it as a weakness, so I want it replaced. That's just how I am. If I don't like the way something is, even if it's from the factory, I'll change it. That's not something that everyone has to do or even wants to do, which is fine. That's just my preference. Some of the stuff that I've covered in here, you know, it depends on riding style. Everyone's riding style is different. You know, the more abuse you give any machine, the more you gotta expect to do. It all comes down to you. How are you gonna drive the thing? How are you gonna treat the thing? Are you gonna do the maintenance to it? You know, all that stuff. So overall, great machine. I love it. I sound like a broken record, but if you guys haven't subscribed yet and you keep watching the videos, please consider doing that. I wanna say, I think it's almost 80% of people are watching these videos and they're not hitting that subscribe button. And hitting that subscribe button helps the channel grow, which helps us as a group grow, and we want to keep growing because you grow the channel bigger, and then hopefully we can start doing bigger things. So if you can do that, I'd appreciate that, and we'll catch you on the next one. Peace!